Welcome back, boxing fans around the world, to another episode of Boxing News Today, here on Talkin Fight, of course. We're going to start off with a quick little story, a little bit of an update on Conor Benn following his not actual suspension, but his issues after having been found tested positive, actually, for some banned drugs. Anyway, let's read from what BoxingNews24.com Barry Holbrook has to say about this. Conor Benn spoke up today on social media, that would be yesterday, thanking God for science, quote unquote, and saying that, quote, evidence doesn't lie, end quote. All this without Benn, 21-0, still not having been cleared of his 2 positive tests for the banned drug clomiphene. In response to Benn's post, Chris Eubank Jr., who's about to fight Liam Smith, remarked that it was science that discovered Conor's 2 positive tests for drugs. Eubank Jr. says that if not for science, he would have fought the Hulk last October. What's interesting is that WBC President Mauricio Suleiman says Benn is free to fight and he's not suspended. However, with Benn, 26 years of age, having given up his boxing license in the UK, it would put him in a situation where he would need to fight outside of the country. If Benn fights in the US, let's be blunt, he won't draw flies because he's not a household name in the States. And the only way he would attract a large crowd is if he fought a popular welterweight like Errol Spence Jr., Terence Crawford, Jaron Boots Ennis, or Virgil Ortiz. Given that Benn is a greenhorn lacking in experience, he isn't ready for these types of fighters, said Conor Benn, I believe. Says Spence Oliver to IFL TV when told Eddie Hearn said that Conor Benn would definitely fight in 2023. And they're looking at opponents like Chris Eubank Jr., Manny Pacquiao, and Kell Brook. He said, this Spence Oliver said, well, if Eddie's saying that, he must know something that we don't, because obviously we haven't had any update about what's going on with Conor Benn in this situation. It's also gone quiet. For Benn to be so confident that his name is going to be cleared, he must have some strong proof of contamination done with the testing done by the VADA over in the UK, said Oliver. He said before Christmas that he's proven his innocence. He's going away to have a nice Christmas, and he's going to come back and let us all know. But there's still no word from Conor. So let's see what happens. Let's see what comes out. But as it stands, he's failed 2 tests. I don't know the legal side of it. It's difficult for me to comment. As it stands, he's failed 2 tests. Where does he go from here? I know he relinquished his license. Let's just say he received a 6-month ban, and he serves that 6 months through the inactivity from the last fight. What does that mean? That he served his time? But he still hasn't got his license here in the UK, does he? So where does he go? Does he go to the States or what? I really don't understand, really, because I haven't been following it too much. All I know as it stands, he's failed those tests. So let's see what happens. You can't talk about him fighting other fighters and talking about Manny Pacquiao, Eubank Jr. again, can you? How can you talk about that when we're in the situation that we're in? Let's get this all cleared up first and then talk about Conor Benn and his comeback. But until then, I find it difficult to be able to talk about certain opponents. The opponents that have been named, to be fair, don't really make any sense, like Gervonta Davis. He's a few weights lower. Eubank Jr. is going to be the same, doing his stuff, looking for Triple G or something like that, looking for some kind of title shot. Manny Pacquiao is my age and is doing exhibitions now. I don't know why that name has been thrown about. I don't understand about these names coming back. Let's clear his name first and take it from there, said Oliver. Let's move along to our friends over at ESPN with respect to a name familiar to UFC fans, Francis Ngannou. And you know, he's left UFC. He's no longer a heavyweight in that division or that whatever you call it, sport. And anyway, the headline reads: Fury, Wilder, Fedor, looking ahead to Francis Ngannou's free agency is the headline. After more than an unsuccessful year of negotiation, after more than a year of unsuccessful negotiations with Fight Promotion, Francis is officially no longer the UFC heavyweight champion. He's 17-3, and he's fought out of his UFC contract in January 2022, defeating Cyril Game, by unanimous decision, what he said was the final fight of his deal. Francis injured a knee before that fight and underwent knee surgery 2 months later, which was unfortunate, but did afford plenty of time for him and the UFC to come to terms. On Saturday, however, UFC announced it was moving on from Francis with a heavyweight title fight between former light heavyweight champ John Jones and Game at UFC 2085 on March 4th in Las Vegas. UFC President Dana White said he offered to make Ngannou the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the company, but it wasn't enough to keep him. So Francis told ESPN on Sunday and does not intend to comment on the matter, but not at this time. There'll be a lot to discuss around the situation if and when Ngannou shares his side with the failed negotiations. But for now, let's look at the possibilities for his fighting future, says ESPN. Ever since Ngannou shared the ring with Tyson Fury following Fury's win over Dillian White in April, it appears to be a fait accompli that we'll one day see Francis lace up the boxing gloves. One reason, of course, is that boxing offers its fighters far more money than MMA. But there's another reason, dearer to Ngannou's heart, a childhood dream. Growing up in Nigeria watching Mike Tyson, Francis said he long envisioned the day he too would win the heavyweight championship in boxing. So that might appear to be a pipe dream for the 36-year-old who has never boxed professionally. But if he really wants to pursue that path, he'll have plenty of options. After all, he's one of the biggest combat sports stars and is free to do as he pleases. In the past, he has stated that his next MMA contract must allow him the flexibility to box. That option, boxing, is always in the back of my pocket, he said. It's something I must do before the end of my career. So there you go, another little wrinkle in the heavyweight scene. Now, speaking of the heavyweight scene, let's move along to Johnny Rice, who had a seventh-round stoppage victory over Guido Vianello this past week. And he says it could lead to an offer for him to fight Jared Big Baby Anderson next. Now, as you all know, Big Baby Anderson is one of our favorites here on Talkin Fight. And we would love to see him fight, but not someone like Johnny Rice. But anyway, let's see what this author has to say. This was out of boxingscene.com. Las Vegas' Rice has sparred with the undefeated Anderson enough to know that fighting him would be much more difficult than boxing Italy's Vianello. The 23-year-old Anderson, who's 13-0, by the way, 13 knockouts out of Toledo, Ohio, has established himself as one of the biggest punchers in the heavyweight division during his 3-year professional career and is widely viewed as one of boxing's rising stars. Yes, we at Talking Fight agree. Matchmakers for Top Rank, Anderson's promoter, haven't solidified Anderson's opponent for his next fight, which will take place on April 8th. ESPN will televise Anderson's next bout as part of its broadcast that'll feature Shakur Stevenson's debut in the lightweight division, which could come against unbeaten Japanese contender Tsuchiro Yoshino. I can't stop the way things go, Rice told Boxing Scene in reference to being offered a fight with Anderson. You know what I mean? I've mentioned Jared countless times. He's outstanding. He does fight incredibly well. And if they had put me in there against him, then I would definitely go to another level of training. That's just a fact because he's that good. And I definitely got better working with him immediately, just like I got better working with Michael Hunter or Efe Ajaba. It's similar to that. I wouldn't do anything on short notice, not even close with him. Rice, by the way, is got a 16-6-1 record with 11 knockouts. And he beat Michael Coffey in his 2 prior appearances and took his fight versus Vianello on less than 1 month's notice. As we all know, Vianello is the Italian 2016 Olympian and was initially scheduled to fight Stephen Shaw, but who was elevated into the main event against Ajagba on Saturday night because Ajagba's original opponent, Oscar Rivas, had to withdraw due to a detached retina. So we'll see what happens. Things are starting to move and shake on the American side of the heavyweight division for sure. Interesting. Another article here on Boxing Scene. Due to circumstances out of the control of BLK Prime, Ivan Redkach, 23-6-1, who was intended to fight Adrian Broner, 34-4-1, in a 10-round welterweight main event on February 25th, will now be replaced by Hammerin' Hank Lundy. Broner versus Lundy, taking place at the Gateway Center in Atlanta, Georgia, will be broadcast live on BLK Prime. More details, including ticket sales and undercard ballots, will be announced at a later date. But the Broner versus Lundy promises to be a thrilling and action-packed matchup between two battle-tested warriors who are promising to go to war. The combination of Broner's speed and power with Lundy's grit and determination is sure to make for an unforgettable night of boxing. Let's leave it at that. Let's move along to another story out of ESPN. Mike Rothstein, women's boxing made considerable strides in 2022. We all know that. Fighters who had spent years, in some cases over a decade, fighting for relevancy and a chance to push their names and the sport into the spotlight have finally accomplished it. There were exciting fights and moments, some that fans are still talking about months after the fights occurred. And this is something for the sport to build on in 2023, which can happen with the current group of well-known names like Clarissa Shields, Katie Taylor, and Amanda Serrano continuing to fight. But in order for there to be real growth, sustainability, and stability in the sport, there needs to be depth. There needs to be more than just the biggest names at the top of the boxing's world to connect with fans. You know the Serranos, Taylors, Shields, Alicia Baumgartners, the Michaela Mayers, Sinisha Estradas. The list is more about who you might be talking about at the end of 2023 that you weren't quite as familiar with at this point in the year. The caveat with this list is this. If a fighter is in the current ESPN pound-for-pound top 10, they were not considered for this list. So these 6 names above, along with Chantel Cameron, Jessica McCaskill, Franchon Crews-Dezurn, and Natasha Jonas, were not eligible. On the whole, these aren't fighters who are prospects. They're the ones, in many cases, who already have world titles, but by the end of this year could end up pushing for a spot on the pound-for-pound best list or could become bigger stars for the sport, similar to Baumgartner and Jonas in 2022. This is not a ranking, says the writer. The fighters are listed in alphabetical order. He starts off with Ramla Ali, fighting in the junior featherweight division with a record of 7-0 with 2 knockouts. Ebony Bridges, IBF bantamweight champion with a record of 9-1 and 4 knockouts. Kim Clavel, who recently unfortunately lost a fight in the junior flyweight, but she was prior to that the junior flyweight champion with a record of 16-0. She's now 16-1. Beatriz Ferreira, fighting in the junior lightweight with a record of 2-0 with 1 knockout. Gabriela Fundora in the flyweight division, 9-0, 4 knockouts. Ellie Scottney, who we've mentioned quite often here on Talkin' Fight, in the junior featherweight division with a 6-0 record. Yokasta Valley, Yoka, WBO IBF junior flyweight champion with a 27-2 record, of great veteran with 9 knockouts. So that rounds out that particular's list of, shall we say, what do you say, not contenders? Young women who might make that top 10 pound-for-pound list at the end of 2023. And so with those names, I think we're all looking for a great year in women's boxing, for it to continue its growth and success and continue to dominate on a headline basis at big venues like Madison Square Garden and Wembley, not to mention a few others, Las Vegas, Manchester, possibly even Toronto. Let's have a look and see what happens. Thank you for joining me here on Talkin' Fight. Appreciate it. Remember, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you later on at 4 p.m. with Cedric Ben and Mike Gore for Knuckle Up. Thank you very much.